Okay, the next to the last episode of Star Trek Lower Decks, we talk about it in a moment. Hello out there, I'm the oldest nerd. In Season 1 of Lower Decks, Captain Freeman thought it would be a good idea to check back up on some civilizations that have been touched by other starships but haven't been visited lately, to keep something like the Pakleds from happening again. And finally, they've come up with this called Operation Flyby and have selected the Cerritos to be the first. And much to the chagrin of Captain Freeman, they've sent a Federation News Network reporter to cover the first mission of Operation Flyby. And what they do is they pick two planets, Ornara and Brekka, which were planets that were mentioned in a Next Generation episode, one Brekka providing drugs to Ornara and to cure a plague, but then getting them addicted and continuing to run their economy on keeping the other planet addicted. Picard fixed it by possibly violating the Prime Directive and cutting the planets off from each other, where Ornara had to go cold turkey. Now, this is 20 years later or so that the first mission of the Cerritos is to go and check on this planet and see how it's doing. Now, that's the A story. The B story, of course, is that Freeman does not trust the lower deckers not to ruin things by having a reporter on board. And so she changes the shift schedule to the lower deckers to work the Alpha Quadrant rather than the Alpha Quadrant. To work the Alpha shift rather than the Beta shift, whatever that means. And in fact, Boimler didn't even know that there was an Alpha shift. However, of course, Mariner finds a way to talk to the reporter. When the reporter comes to interview Freeman and has all kinds of bad things to say about her and ask her what her reaction is, this is all based on previous episodes of the series, she, of course, suspects Mariner and puts her off the ship. We'll go no farther than that. But what happens is that they bring back references to Starbase 80, which they did in a previous episode. They bring back the archaeologist that was mentioned in previous episodes. And they bring in a couple of things that we have not seen since, well, we saw them on Voyager, but they really came about in Deep Space Nine, called the Breen. They are a species of warlike beings, and they have weapons that can pretty much cripple a starship. And so there is some going against the Breen in this episode as well. They mention in jokes of going to Beta 3 and seeing if they're still hooked back on Landru. They talk about other Easter eggs from past shows, like, for instance, they want to make sure that the government doesn't look nice and is secretly run by kids, stuff like that. But the show itself does not really strike it as being that funny or follow in with the character development that we've seen through the series. We have seen in the previous show where we find that Mariner has had a good duty report, that she's been behaving herself, that she's been a good officer. And suddenly nobody thinks that she is when she's accused of torpedoing the ship, really, in telling the truth to this FNN reporter. And we find that any kind of regard that Ransom had for her is completely gone. We don't see a lot of the other members of the crew acting anything like they have in the last few episodes, but rather as if they wrote this episode back in season 1 and decided to spring it back here. This episode appears to be rather out of place for me and really quite disappointing. Now, there's a cliffhanger on it, and we'll have to see how that works in the final episode of the season next week. But I'm hoping that they address some of this, because it doesn't. It looks like it was written in a hurry, and that concerns me on a otherwise very well written season of Lower Decks. So I'd like to know what you think about this. Please let me know in the comments at the bottom. And of course, if you've not subscribed or rung the bell so you know when the next video is coming your way, please do so now. Once again, there is no obligation. It does not cause you headaches, sleepless nights, or any other side effects that have been noted. So being a member, or rather being a subscriber to this channel would be certainly very appreciated. So until next time, don't go far.